welcome. I'm going live today with Dr. Erica Jane from All Day Development. We're going to be talking about the first year of mommy and baby and what that looks like. Here she is. Erica, am I joining with Dr. Erica or are we doing All Day Development here? Just give her 2 seconds and she's going to hop on, giving us her expertise in this field. Welcome, guys. We have some fun questions coming your way with some fun answers. Awesome. Here we are. Here she comes.
Hello, hello.
Hi. Oh, that's a horrible angle of me. Let's see.
That's okay. It's your crotch. It's fine. I was actually going to sit on the floor, too. Let's switch this up. Sorry, people. There we go. This is where we spend most of our time anyway, right? On the floor, so it's all good.
Our time anyway. So I'm so happy to see you, Dr. Erica Jane from All Day Development. We're going to be talking about all things baby and mom postpartum and how similar they are.
Mm-hmm. Wait, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you perfectly.
Okay, just making sure. Because I know last time we had a little delay on the thing, but I'm connected to the Wi-Fi now, so I think we should be okay.
I hear you perfectly. How are you doing?
I'm great. How are you?
Great. So let's reintroduce Erica. Erica, tell everybody, because we're going to be posting this video also in my upcoming newsletter. So reintroduce yourself. Tell everybody who you are, why you're passionate about what you do, and why what you and I do and how they're very similar.
Okay, so I am a pediatric physical therapist. I work full-time for a local school district in Westchester, New York. I have my own private practice on the side where I see clients basically birth to 21. And then we have All Day Development, which my best friend, Allison, who's in OT, and I started as just like a little way to share information, a little blog situation going on over this past year, because we would have these car ride morning talks on the phone, and we would talk about all these things and we would say, a lot of people need to know this information. So that's how this specific thing was born. But as far as being a pediatric PT, when I went to PT school, I told Missy this before, like I thought I wanted to work with athletes, thought I wanted to go in orthopedics. And then I ended up doing a clinical affiliation in pediatrics and I loved it. And then I just kind of took it from there. And when I first started practicing, I practiced in pediatrics and I was also in orthopedics. And I really figured out that I like working with kids better than I like working with adults. And I am extremely passionate about development because to me, and just in my practice over the past almost 10 years, which is kind of crazy, I have seen that the first year of life makes a really huge impact on the rest of development and the rest of a child's life and our lives as well. And so it's just something that I'm very passionate about and getting out that information to the masses.
Awesome. Welcome back. So Eric and I have an interesting topic for you today. We spoke a lot like 2 weeks ago just about general development in children and a lot of other different topics. But today we're going to sort of deep dive into the first year of baby movement and how actually it's so similar to how I personally, I don't even want to use the word train, but how I approach fitness with my mom's postpartum. And by like 6 or 7 weeks after baby. It's not like you're calling me day one. It's 6 or 7 weeks after baby is born. So what we're going to do, Erica, I think is like maybe you talk about like what the baby might be doing. For example, 3 months postpartum or 3 months baby is probably spending a lot of time face down, doing things like tummy time, maybe even obviously earlier than that. But the way that I start to approach this with my moms is I'm having my mom sort of mimic the way babies also develop that first year postpartum. So maybe
Exactly.
us a little bit about that since you're the PT and go into some details around that.
Right. So at about 3 months, so something to note is, right, I always say like tummy time is obviously important, but playing in other positions is also important. So spending time on their belly, but also spending time in side lying and spending time on their back in an appropriate way. is also really important. So at about 3 months, we should be starting to be on our forearms. Hold on, I'll demonstrate. Right, so babies should be able to be on their forearms. They should be able to be starting to bring their elbows in underneath them, and they're starting to work those cervical neck extensors, keeping their head up, and they should be looking around their environment like this, preparing themselves for rolling, which will come in the next couple of months. Back to belly, belly to back.
Yes.
And
So
yeah,
for
so go ahead.
around that space, around 3 months postpartum, maybe I'm having them do a lot of Y and T lifts. So again, on the belly, very similar to baby, working their posterior chain in the same way that the baby is naturally doing. So we may not realize that we're doing it, or my clients may not realize that I'm sort of mimicking their baby, but that's exactly what I'm doing. So what Erica's saying is that baby, not even trying to work different ways outside of tummy time. There's other ways to do it, but that's how I mimic sort of the tummy time with moms, right? Really important,
Right.
for obvious reasons, to strengthen our posterior chain, especially for postpartum moms, because all this is sort of not working the way that it was before.
Right. So we talked last time about how babies are essentially born like with a little bit of diastasis, right? So, I mean, something that your baby is naturally doing that I know that you focus a lot on, when they're born, what do? They basically eat, sleep, and poop, right? So that's pretty much it. But they also breathe, and babies are the best breathers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Babies, if you watch a sleeping baby, they're doing 360 breathing, right? They're breathing deep into their belly. They're breathing, everything's coming out and expanding. You can see it in their back. They are the best breathers that there are. And I know that if you wanted to talk a little bit about breath work or something, that I know that you.
Yeah. So throughout, the program that I provide for people is called the Fit Fourth. We do so much
Mhm.
breath work, and you'd probably be tired of me talking about it, but the people that follow the program are like, oh my gosh, why am I doing so much breathing? But actually, we sort of lose that, not just in life from stress, but we naturally lose that in pregnancy, because our bellies expand and our organs move around to accommodate space for the baby. So it's almost impossible to get that sort of the expansion in your ribs and in your deep abdominals that you would get, hopefully, prior to baby. So the breath work naturally helps the diaphragm and the pelvic floor work together to naturally sort of heal that diastasis. So in my opinion, the best thing that you could do postpartum, and we're talking like very early on, is just focus on your deep abdominal breathing, which our babies do naturally. So it's
Right.
quite hard to think of all these things when we're postpartum, like lack of sleep and another thing for the to-do list. But maybe you have some tips or tricks for our parents. I know you're really good at that, how to sort of trickle that in throughout your day.
Right. So, I mean, just in terms of if you look at your baby and you take cues from your baby and you're like, what is my baby doing? Those are all the things that you need to be doing, right? They're breathing. I need to remember to work on my breath. They're a natural reminder of what you need to be doing. Yes, you obviously have to keep them alive, and that's a pretty daunting task, right? But you have to take your cues from them. They're working on breathing. You can too. If you're like, oh, okay, it's time, we're gonna play on our belly or whatever it is, you can also be on your belly and be working, because that's another thing that I see. So not only I obviously treat kids, but I see a lot of moms and a lot of dads, right? I see the whole family, really. I'm teaching them kind of what to do. And something that I always see is something that you obviously program for, right? Is this rounded shoulder position. Everyone's kind of sitting like this. We're sitting with this kyphosis. And we're holding baby all the time. We have this extra weight here. So you have to think about what your baby's working on, right? I'm working on, being able to lift my head up and being able to look around when I'm on my belly. You can kind of already do that because you're an adult, but you need to be working that posterior chain. So that way, when you're sitting upright or you're standing upright, you have those muscles working. So it's really taking the cues from your kid and
Yep.
what they need, what they're doing. So, and if you think about it like that, it almost it clicks and makes a little bit more sense.
Yeah, that's awesome. So now moving on to maybe 4 or 5 months, like tummy, knee. I notice with my kids, maybe they're like, you've moved your tummy time to like you start to move the legs, right?
Right.
So for me with my moms, it might look like something like, all right, I'm gonna get them to come up to like almost a crawl position. Talk to us about like those. Talk to us about that 4 to 5 month period.
Right. So before we get to there, we have to be able to roll, right? So a lot of people think that their kid can roll, but in reality, it's almost gravity,
Mm-hmm.
or they're doing it and they kind of scared themselves. If you ever
Yeah.
notice the first time a baby like rolls over, they're like very startled. They're like, "What just happened?" Right? Their whole world just flips upside down, literally. So honing in on those skills, but the things that they need to be able to do, like I was saying before, is being able to bring those elbows in, being able to like tuck here, bring everything in here. They should be able to chin tuck, right? So working these cervical neck flexors, not necessarily extension, but cervical neck flexors, so that way they can then weight shift and roll over. So what you're really doing when you're having moms come up onto hands and knees or moving their legs in any position is really teaching them weight shifting. So
Yep.
everything that we do in life, right, is weight shifting. I don't care if you danced, I don't care if you skied, I don't care if you played basketball, I don't care what you do. Everything that you're doing is a series of weight shifts, essentially. So you need to go back to basics as mom.
Mm-hmm.
How do I get from here to there? And baby is just learning how to move their body, so they have to learn to shift their weight. So if I unweight one side of my body, it's now free to move forward. So essentially, the weight shifts are really what you're focusing on for that. And then once we've gotten that roll situation under control, we now have, for sure, right? Because you have to have that shoulder stability, right? I have to be able to use my pecs. I have to be
Yep.
able to use my lats to push off and to roll backwards. And then we can talk about the other way too. But now I know that I have stability. So I'm now on my belly, right? I can be here. And before I was playing on my forearms, well, now I'm really strong and I can come up on my arms. And then that's when you start to see this pushback,
Yep.
right? The other thing that they need to be able to do is get out of that frog position, right? Like little babies are born and they're like this, right?
Yeah.
So they need to be able to come out of that frog position, and also dissociate it. So what you were doing before, having mom bring that leg up, the other
Yep.
one was still extended. Both
Mm-hmm.
your legs aren't in the frog position, right? Because then we wouldn't be able to weight shift over that side body. So it's the same thing for babies, being able to get up into that hands and knees position, whether it's pushing back, whether it's bringing a leg up. And like I said in our last live, variety is the hallmark of development. There's more than one way of doing things, right? You don't always just push back onto your hands and knees. You don't always get up. If we had 20 people in this room and we had everybody get up 4 or 5 times but didn't tell them what we were doing, they would probably get up a different way every time.
Yeah.
Because we have been, we have different ways of doing things, right? We've learned different motor plans and they all get us to the end. There might be one way that's more comfortable for us, but more likely than not, we can deviate from there. And that's what we're teaching baby
Yeah.
at
And what's
that point.
interesting that you just said, because this is exactly how Lacey and I teach our body weight and our a lot of our kettlebell stuff is that chin tuck that you mentioned,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like you're not working those muscles where you're flexing backwards. You need to learn how to tuck and keep this sort of stacked and aligned, right? So it's almost like making it.
Exactly.
So our babies do this naturally, like you said, and this is something I'm constantly cueing when I'm teaching, whether it's a push up, whether it's a plank, whether it's a standing clean, whatever it is. Like you have to hammer that home in your body weight.
Mm-hmm.
It translates over to all the other movements that you do. That I just want to point that out. That's a really, really good point.
So that chin tuck really should be there by 3 months. And if it's not on your belly, then, and I'm not, so there's a whole other piece of it, of being able to tuck your chin and then lift your body up.
Yep.
But I'm talking like on your belly, you should be able to have that by about 3 months,
Yep.
having that chin tuck position, because that's your basis, like you say, for every other movement that you have there. If you watch a kid and if we put, a row of 5 kids and we have them roll or we facilitate whatever it is, you will see them using that chin tuck.
Yep.
And you will also see maybe some of the kids have developed some sort of a compensation, right? So sometimes as adults, we develop compensations too. So our heads are forward and then we're actually just using neck extension instead. Babies do the same thing. So that's why when you're looking at your baby and you're looking at yourself, and it's easy if you have more awareness of what is going on with you, right? Like your moms that you work with, you're gonna have more awareness of what's going on with your baby. Because when you watch your baby roll, you're like, oh, they rolled. But then you can really look and say, oh, wait, they just threw themselves into extension using their neck. They didn't actually use any of the things that I'm doing. So when you're putting them through all those positions, they can kind of see what should be working. You're bringing them back to basics. You're bringing them back to baby, which is fantastic because then they can be a little bit more in tune with what's going on with baby.
And keep in mind, people, these types of body weight movements that Erica and I are talking about can be used for probably most, correct me if I'm wrong, most rehab programs.
Oh, yes.
And they are fantastic warm-ups to your weight workout routine.
Mm-hmm.
So the crawling, the pushing away, the happy baby type movements, all that stuff should already be programmed, in my opinion, into sort of your routine, whether it's like once a week. If you are a postpartum mom, maybe it's like a few times a week. I know that's a lot to ask, but just being aware of your movement and how our babies do these things efficiently, and just things to look out for to know muscling through these movements.
Right.
Really utilizing all the right muscles.
So can you go back to your happy baby position? So like like if you were going to talk about that, and then I'll go off of that.
So this happy baby position, right? What month period is this happening?
So approximately around 5 months, because this is a position that needs to happen. If you see her, right, her tush is lifted up, right, she's touching her feet, and she's using both of her hands to touch her feet. So at this point, if she was going to roll from back to belly, she would have to lift her leg. She's going to bring her arm over. She's going to start to rotate. Everything comes over. Her arm comes over, and then she's going to roll over. So a baby would roll all the way over onto their belly. But what I know you're having them do there is going right at exactly. Yes.
So what this is, Erica.
Turkish get up. Well, not, yeah.
So I all this movement exactly what Erica says. This is why we're such good teamwork here. So I'm having my moms. I don't make 5 months to program this.
Yes, of course.
But probably like a month or two into their training program, and I work up to this. They're doing very slow, controlled rolls. So notice my shoulders packed. I'm creating a little bit of a tuck here, so it's almost like a hollow hold. And I'm using my core to slowly bring myself back down.
Right. So exactly what, and notice the position of her chin tuck, right? So obviously, if I'm baby, right, here I am. I start to play with my feet. So what the muscle that I'm starting to activate here is my transverse abdominis, right? Or rectus abdominis as well. Really getting into those deep core muscles. That's why it's really important to see feet to hands play, and then take your baby socks off and let them suck on their feet, because they're getting so much sensory input, right? But they're also working their abs. So that's something that you definitely want to see. It's not weird or gross that they're trying to lick their own feet. It's something that needs to happen, because something that they're being provided input to the bottom of their feet, which then translates later to walking. So that's a whole other situation. But what I do want to mention as a little flag is, if you see your baby and they can go to one side with both hands, but they can't do it to the other, red flag. If they can do both hands to both feet, great. If they can only do one side, if there's obviously an imbalance there, we've got a red flag, and obviously there's some muscle weakness within the trunk on one side. But so that right there is going to translate later into rolling. And so you'll see maybe they prefer to roll to one side. So just a little tidbit.
Yeah. That's a good point. So now baby is doing on their own sort of a roll, or wherever your position is next.
Right. So babe, from a typical like developmental standpoint, right? We'd be on our back, we'd learn to roll, we'd come over, and you'd see them finish here, typically. But as they're starting to be, so now as we're moving down the chain, right, we end up here because we're learning to do what? Push up into sitting, which is going to come 6, 7, 8 months. So and I said this in our last time, and I'll say it again, until your baby can get themselves into the sitting position, they are not a sitter. Which is fine. You can place them there because there's obviously things that you need to work on there, but we can't really call them a sitter until they can get there. And all of these components need to kind of come together here. So when we're pushing up to sitting, we want to see, we don't want to, they're not going to push, sorry, I'm not in the camera here. They're not going to push themselves up if they don't have what we call lateral head righting. So your body has this natural tendency to want to make your eye, so my eyes are obviously not in line with the horizon when I'm here.
Yep.
Your head will correct here, and you'll initiate your obliques on this side, and you'll bring everything up, right? And now I'm back on the horizon. So it's the same thing with your moms, right? You have what you have to tell them to focus on in terms of what we're actually working on. Because anybody can just like sit up and like throw themselves up.
Yep.
But you know, when you're really working on that movement, and babies have to work on that movement because they don't have that coordination to just throw their bodies up yet. Right? So you would have your moms.
I do a lot of unweighted. I mean, this is not like right in the beginning. We do a lot of unweighted partial pieces of the Turkish get up, which is exactly what our kids do. And as we go through the year, you can see like eventually your baby's standing and moving, right? Ways to incorporate, there's ways to incorporate what our baby's doing and break it down to like something that seems like an exercise for mom.
Right, exactly. And the thing is that your baby has to do this because they're gaining a new skill. And you need to do these things because you need to gain back what you had.
Right.
Right? There was, and you know, I've treated kids whose parents have, or moms or whomever have not been in the, they were never really like movement people to begin with, we'll call it. So even getting them to get down on the floor with their baby was huge.
Right.
And in order, so, you know, we've talked about this before too, but in order for us to have development happen, we need to have unrestricted movement. Where does that happen? On the floor. It can happen in the pack and play, right? Because it's not really, you're confined, right? Baby is safe there, but it's flat. It's an area that they can move around and move their body in, right? But you getting on the floor with them is way more enticing than just like leaving them there. They like you. They want to be around you, right?
Totally.
So that's a take home. So if nothing else, working on your ability to go through these motions should be a motivator for you, because then you can interact with your baby, right? So that's kind of where my stance is on it. It's why I feel so strongly about how can you even, you know, expect your baby to develop and be pushing these things if you're not going to get on the floor, and you have to take care of yourself too before anybody else, right? You have to take care of yourself.
Right. And that's sort of that's in my job here is to like make it seem like more of a program routine, right? So like my job for mom is to be like, okay, let me like, if your baby, if you have 10 or 15 or 20 minutes till your baby's napping, like let's try to get this in, you know, let's try to do these things so that you do have a stronger core, so that you have a stronger back and better posture and all these things, because they all just make. So okay, so now we're rolling. So it happens on what, 5 months?
Yeah, so typically between 3 and 6 months, you're going to see belly to back to belly. So tummy to back is typically 3 to 4 months. Back to belly is typically between 5 and 6 months. And so then from there, you're going to see the push back into hands and knees.
So you're going from like, so you're here.
Yep. You're on. Yep.
Doing
up onto those arms. And then you're on hands and knees. Yep.
So I do a ton of crawling with my moms, and we'll also talk about how the weight shifting works in here. You could go into that. If you want to go into that. I was going to say something I can't remember now, but go ahead.
Yeah, so I mean, in terms of the crawling here, before a baby goes anywhere, they're going to do a lot of this rocking in this position, right? So back and forth. They're really just getting their bearings for like, what am I even supposed to do here? I don't even quite get it. So it's a lot of back and forth. Then comes the side to side weight shift. So typically like in front of her or in front of baby would be a toy or something. And yeah, I want to like reach for it, or even something that's on a vertical surface that I'm looking up to and I'm trying to reach for that ahead of me. Yeah. So that way they're getting this type of, you know, input there. And so then they start to do this thing where they figure out, oh, okay, well, I can move my hands and I can move my legs, but typically they start to go backwards first, which
Okay.
is really, which is really comical.
Yeah.
Yes. So, yep. And so they start to figure out this opposing movement, right? So some of our primitive reflexes are starting to integrate. We're learning about the left and right side of our body. We're really learning about, our crossing the midline, right? So our right and our left and our right working, and that weight shift and what that kind of looks like. But before we get there, right, we need to make sure that these obliques are working and these lats are working and your QL and all of those things. So that's why the rolling, the prone on your belly, and all of those types of movements are important. And also, really, before you even get there, sometimes, a lot of the time, they'll just push straight back into what I call the baby plank. Right? So they're here, they're on their belly, they're playing. All of a sudden, you see them like in this like downward dog thing, and then they don't even know how to get out of it, right?
Yes.
And their tush is flying in the air. It's actually really one of the cutest things. But so right there, what they're doing is they're really working on that shoulder stability and they're working on that core engagement. So that way they can maintain this hands and knees position. So the other thing you want to look for when your baby is on hands and knees, you don't want to see this. Just like you don't want to see it in adults, right? You want to see this nice, strong, position.
Totally.
So that's huge.
I remember what I was going to say, critical here. So it takes a baby typically, a year to get to the standing walking thing. Typically. I know there's some kids walk at 10 months.
Right.
Walk
there's
at
windows, of course.
Huge range. So I'm not trying to make anyone feel alarmed here. But let's just say it's a year for argument's sake.
Yes.
So I don't wait a year in my programs to let my moms walk. My point is, in my programs, like I condense a lot of this stuff, but what Erica and I are trying to get across is a lot of these movements are the same, right? So like the crawling is in the program, exactly what Erica just said. Core stability, shoulder stability, core strength, so many benefits to crossing the midline, working both sides of your sorry, I cut you off. I just wanted to add that in about the programming. Like, it doesn't take a year for me to tell my mom to start squatting again.
Right. Oh, I would hope not. Yeah. Right. So, but it is huge. But what you're saying is that you're just condensing into a smaller window. But like I said before, they've already had these skills. They're not learning them for the first time, right? So obviously, it would be a shortened window.
Yeah.
So after we started kind of crawling, and during. Typically you're going to see a lot of this, right? So what I just did is I pushed myself back onto my feet. I got myself into sitting. Yep. And then you'll see a lot of this. Oh, I was on my belly. Wait, now I want to kind of get up. I'm here. Wait, no, I want to go on all fours. Oh, wait, I want to be sitting here. So a lot of switching in and out of positions. And so what I will say as a pediatric PT, one of the main things that we really look for is the transition. It's not so much the skill, it's how you got there, right? So, because you have to have all of those muscles, anybody can just sit here like this, right? With my legs out in front of me, I'm just like stuck here, but it takes mobility, to get somewhere. And so obviously something that we say all the time, right, is, proximal stability leads to distal mobility. So having this being stable, right, your core being stable allows for movement. And then will allow for all of those fine motor skills to come into play, right? Why do you think your baby doesn't really use your pincer grasp until almost 11 months to pick up the Cheerios, right? Why we start like raking first? Everything is a gross movement because we have to develop stability here. So that's another thing to kind of remember. It's the same thing with you have to start with the foundation. Here's your foundation, right? You don't just tell somebody to go out and start deadlifting 500 pounds, right? You're like, hold on, let's go back.
We need the foundation first. Can you breathe?
Yes. Are you able to breathe? Okay, great. You're alive.
Yeah, no, totally. So yeah, I find the crawling really fascinating. One thing I add in with my moms, and I'm not sure where you see this fits in with baby development, but I do a lot of crab positioning because to help not open up the chest. I talk a lot about pushing down into the ground because I think it's hard to grasp the concept of like squeezing your armpits, engaging your lats, right? Yes. by putting someone in that crab position, right? And
Mm-hmm.
let's be honest, a lot of people are slightly hypermobile postpartum because of the hormones in the body. So,
Mm-hmm.
okay, let's not think about opening up the chest. Let's think about pushing down into the ground, squeezing up,
Mm-hmm.
engaging your lats. Because
Right.
one of the things I find when people start to do these movements, or they're a mom and they're rolling, and I'm like, okay, it's not like a roll here. It's like you're here,
It's a
right?
lengthening, right? So
Yeah.
it's right, right.
Uh,
So, I mean, I guess you can really talk about like how so babies are really learning to sit for the first time, right? So I typically and I use crab walking, crab position a lot of time my older kids because let me tell you, they it's good for glute activation, it's good for lats, it's great for just pushing the ground away, right? People don't understand the concept. So that is something that I totally program. So there's a few things here. Instead of pushing down away, when baby's first starting to sit, I think we talked about this last time, that little push toy,
yep.
that one that we like put like it's a giraffe, and the
Yep.
thing spins around or anything that they have to push down on, they're doing natural lat work, right? So, and also something else to remember, now we're in sitting, right? So we have all different ways of sitting. Babies when they first start sitting, they're like, woo, things are going crazy, right? But all of a sudden they'll catch themselves. But you'll see them go to the side and boom, they put their hand down. Boom, they put their hand down, right? So that's a protective extension, we call that. Ever seen your kid run and they're about, even your big boys, right? They're going to fall. They don't just fall flat on their face. If they do, we have an issue or it was really quick. But they typically put their hands out first, right? Which is why we see a heck of a lot of more hand or arm injuries or shoulder injuries than we do face plants. But also to the back, they'll put their hands back. And what position do they then end up in? And where do they have to go? They have to push themselves back to get to here. So they kind of do this naturally to all sides to develop their sitting balance, as we call it, right?
Awesome.
So
yeah, got it. Very similar.
parallels.
Yeah, a lot of parallels. So now you're in your crawl.
Yep.
And when do kids start either lifting knees? I don't even know if we're there yet. Or so, I'm having my mom sometimes just hold it here.
Mm-hmm.
Or I know babies, obviously, I call this the beginner crawl in my programs because some, this is maybe hard. Like you said, it may be challenging just to sit on the ground with their kids, right? So doing a beginner crawl may be really challenging. Then I'll program, because also it's like pulling down the lats, keeping, like you said, this all has to stay like really tight.
Mm-hmm.
Chin is tucked. So babies do these things naturally. When do they lift the knees, or what's the next step for them?
So it's it kind of all happens at once, right? So I was talking about the position where they end up in like downward dog. Yep. And then they're also kind of on their hands and knees. And you may see them lifting their knees up a little bit here too. Another thing that I should mention is when you're crawling, you have a kid who is crawling and they are lifting their legs up like this. We want this. Take your baby's socks off. Take your baby's pants off. You want all of this information into their body, right? So if I'm not getting any information, I'm not going to put my legs down. So that's why you want to really make sure that you have that off, right? So that's going to translate for later. Like I know I have in front of my leg. I know I have an anterior tibialis. That's for later. But so kind of what happens from there, right? So we're crawling is now we end up, yes, we're going to end up pushing into different positions to get back to where we want. So it may not be a sustained crawl, like a bear crawl, like you're talking about, but it's us moving through that position to get to another position that you'll more typically see.
Got it. Okay, that's cool. That's interesting what you're saying. So, okay, so now we're crawling and we're trying to push into different positions, and this is also kind of what I'm work on is like, okay, this type of thing, right? It's like, it's like the reach.
So, right, and even from there, so right, so another milestone that you'll see is being here, one hand, and then reaching to play with something here. Right, so it's really, I've got 3 points of contact and I'm reaching to play. And then I come back down, I'm like, oh, I want to reach and play this one. So that's why playing on a vertical surface, even as young as, 3 months old, is huge. So not everything needs to be just on the floor right in front of them. It can be up high, but and having them reach for things to facilitate that. So here's another thing I should say. All of this happens when babies have the opportunity to explore, right? So this is how development should go. So say you have a kid who's delayed, that's totally fine. They may just need a little bit more help getting there. Sometimes we have kids who are delayed because they're not provided with the experience,
Right.
right? So providing them with that experience, that's what's really going to catapult you down the development track. But so yeah, getting in and out of those positions, and then ultimately your progression is going to be two hands,
Right.
two hands up. So having 2 points of contact. More often than not, you'll see up tall on your knees. Sorry, my camera. Up tall on your knees, which I don't know if you can even see me. Up tall on your knees.
The split screen screws us up here.
I know. Hold on, let me fix this because I'm pointed down a little bit. Here we go. Sorry. So up tall on your knees, and then playing at a vertical surface.
Yeah.
So you'll see a lot of that. And then you'll see, oh, cool, I can put one leg up. Oh, cool, I can put another leg up. And maybe I'm reaching and rotating. And I'm talking, I'm seeing what's going on over there. There's something behind me. So all that is getting you ready for standing and rotation is where we derive all of our power from, right? And you know that, but rotation is where we derive all of our power from. So that's something that you should always also remember. And that's why it's so important to cross the midline.
Yeah, and crossing the midline, like Erica's talking about, doesn't have to just happen in rotation. It could happen in a crawl position when we're doing things like this. Like obviously, these are not doing this, but these are types of things I do for the mom, or even a move forward and a tap. That's crossing the midline. So all those things help with healthy brain development, right? Like our actually, it's like not something to be worried about. But for me, when I'm focusing just on mom, these are the types of things that I trickle into the workout to help facilitate and recovery postpartum. I always find crossing the midline very fascinating.
Right. So I mean, just as a side note, like all of my kids that I treat in school, they come in and they know that there's something that we do first every single time. Every single time they come to see me, the first thing that we do is our 4 crossing midline exercises, and we start there because there's so many ways to progress these 4 little exercises, but they know that that's like their warm up, right? And my kindergartners all the way up to high school know that they're going to do it, and I can progress it to meet all of their needs, right? Because just like you're saying, our babies are not going to sit there and do shoulder taps, but what they are going to do is be on their hands and knees and reaching for that toy over here and reaching for that toy over there, if you provide them with the environment for it.
Right. Yeah. No. It really goes postpartum. Postpartum for moms and babies are so intertwined. It makes a lot of sense. And it's the same thing with the Turkish get up, right? It's just called a Turkish get up, but if you break it down, parts of it, you can really use it in so many different ways. Like I can have my moms warm up with just a body weight partial Turkish get up, like multiple times on one side, and that could be just tiring in itself.
For sure.
And as long as you're like understanding the connection between your pubic bone and your sternum and alignment, you're really getting a lot of benefits just from that movement alone. The crawling and stuff can be really challenging, and that comes later. But there's also so many different ways, as you're saying, to progress crawling and crab movements. I can take lateral, forward and back, crab and crawl, and progress that in so many different ways. And people are like, I'm tired just from crawling.
But I think that it's something that is really important to remember. And I hear a lot of moms say this, like, oh, I want to get back to blah, 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 or I want to get back to blah, blah, blah. There are people who gave birth and didn't have that mind-body connection beforehand and didn't have that understanding of where their body is in space. And they were just going through the motions. And another thing that I say that my older kids know, I always say, what does Dr. L always say? And they're like, if you can't do it slow, you can't do it at all. Because, right, if you can't do it slow and you can't make all of those connections, then you're just using momentum. And then are you really using your strength? Are you really using anything that, is within you? So you really need to be, so driving that point home for mom then kind of transfers to baby, because if you see your baby just all of a sudden starting to say walk, right? And they're just going, oh, and like walking and they look like they're going to fall over, but they don't. But then all of a sudden they end up on their toes. You're like, wait, hold on, there's something wrong here. They're not actually using their muscles, right? So it's all, you need to have that awareness for yourself so you can have awareness for those around you.
Yeah, it's all connected. So talk to us. Is there anything you else want to add in the first year? So now we're almost standing.
Right. So vertical play. Right. So vertical play is huge. Right. So we're working on shoulder stability and vertical play. We're engaging. This is a developmental position that I use all the time. Like from because, right, what are we doing? We're stacking our pelvis, we're stacking our hips, we're stacking our chin, we're playing, right? So we're doing exactly, and it's not that hard, right? You could do anything. You could be drawing in this position for an older kid. For a baby, I use a lot of like suction toys. I use like squigs or something like that. I stick them on a mirror, stick them on a wall. They're more than happy to play with things like that. But so getting them to that position, and then ultimately when they're here, they're starting to reach, and what are they doing? Oh, we're weight shifting on our knees. And so what happens when I weight shift over here? What am I naturally going to do? Boom, this leg comes up. I don't know if you can even see me.
Yep.
So this leg then comes up. And so here I am. I'm playing in half kneeling.
Yep.
I'm figuring all this out. And then ultimately I'm going to use, a box or whatever, and I'm going to pull up to stand. So pulling up to standing is huge because you want to make sure it's done equally to both sides. More often than not, kids kind of push into standing first. So they might be here, and then they may just like push up from here and walk in.
Right.
And then eventually they kind of end up in this position and stand up. It all kind of happens simultaneously, but those are all the things you want to look for. But so, right, they're using their arms to pull themselves up, and then eventually they're not going to use anything to pull themselves up. But kids don't typically stand up like this until like 2 or 3. But that's where you want them to go. What they're going to do is they're going to stand up to what we call plantigrade or bear stance. So they're here, they push back, and they stand up. So that's like really the progression that we see, but ultimately we want to get them to the standing through half kneel.
Yep.
Because and equal on both sides, because that shows leg strength, that shows core strength, balance, coordination, and all of those things that we really look for. So and I know that that's where you eventually end up, right?
Yes, it is eventually where I end up. So it takes me, like I said, I condense it, but by week 4, typically I'm having mom do like very slow, like 5 count lower, very low rep squats. Like,
right.
I err on the side of caution, right? You don't know where, you don't know where people are starting from, right?
Right.
Working with a one-on-one client, obviously that also is very, it just dependent on the person. But yes, by the end of a couple of weeks, people are doing balance work, slow march, things like that. Like all things you can also do in a crawl position, right? So like
right.
weight shifts, again, it just depends on where you're doing this.
Right, but even your slow marching, right, in standing position.
Yep.
We're going further than a year. But what is that? Single leg stance, right? So we're working on that's a tactic that I use to improve single leg stance. What do you need single leg stance for? Walking, running, kicking a ball, doing everything, right? So there's all these little things that we think about, or that I look at, and people are like, I never asked them to stand on one foot, but they get there because they're provided with that environment to do so. But like you're saying, you having mom do that in this condensed version, baby's going to take a little bit longer. But if mom's already gone through it, they can be like, oh, look, they just stood up like that. Oh, I've done that. I do that when I do my blah, blah, blah.
Yep.
And babies are also working eccentrically all the time too. So if you notice, they'll like be playing up here and then they'll drop something on the floor. And they're like, oh man, I got to get that. And at first you'll see them just go boom, and they'll do like the booty bump, as I call it, with the diaper. It just lands on the floor, and then they're like, oh, got to get back up. And then you start to see this eccentric lowering, and that is really indicative. That's where we're going to be building our leg strength. So do I have my kids do squats all the time? Do I make it fun? Yes. So like they're picking things up, they're getting a puzzle piece, they're getting the pennies to put in the pig, whatever it is. But then bending down and picking it up is reinforcing that appropriate movement pattern.
Right. No, that's interesting. Something I love about you, besides many things, so you talked about this last time, but I wanted you to expand on it. Is how opening natural ways to play in an open environment,
Right.
Whether it's mom and baby or just baby, whatever you think is helpful.
So I think that really having space around you is kind of like, do I think that everyone needs to redecorate their whole house when they have a kid? No. I also think that you shouldn't have a million things to put baby in. So when we talk about an open environment, it means an environment that is actively changing, right? So yeah, the older brother may walk through here, or you may be over here. It's something that's changing. It's not always static, and they're not static in the environment. So, you know, having a mat, like I'm on my gym floor mat right now, but having a mat for them to play on where you can put the toys out and then they can, you know, kind of surf around and play. But also really getting to know where they should be, right? I mean, there's a million apps that tell you a million different things, but if you really look at the major milestones, you can see, okay, so my baby should be on hands and knees. I probably don't want everything to be flat on the floor for him right now, right? I can use something like a vertical surface. Or they're working on sitting. We obviously don't want them looking here because they're just be totally forward, right? So we have to change the environment for them. Or you're like, oh, my baby's not standing. I'm like, well, did you use the table? Did you use the couch? What do you mean? Well, I want to play with, you know, this thing here. I'm going to put it up there. If you keep giving them everything and they don't have to work for it, they're just going to sit there, right? They're not going to go through those transitions. They're not going to go through those all the things that we need to get them to. They're never going to go to standing if everything's always on the floor for them, right? And babies by nature are curious.
Yeah.
Right? They want to put everything in their mouth. They want to know what everything is because that's how they learn about their environment. So you just need to nurture and embrace that crazy first year, right? The crazy first 2 years, whatever, the crazy rest of your life. But you know, you have to embrace that and just to nurture that curiosity because that is how they develop. And their interaction with their environment and their toys and you and all of that stuff directly correlates to their, you know, their school experience, their education, how they interact in the classroom, how they interact in life, social skill, everything. So it all starts within the first year and giving them that environment and manipulating the environment to get them to do what you want to do is huge.
That's great. And I also think like it's similar to moms, right? Like don't be scared to move.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not telling you to go pick up weights, but but knowing that if you just like observe your child, like your movement may mimic your child's and just practicing things that they do naturally. Just, you know, just be curious, stay curious.
Right. And we were born to move, right? So, I mean, I would be curious to hear your take on this, right? Like, so I always question why is everybody's like the precaution for a shoulder surgery or the precaution for postpartum, like don't lift any more than 1 gallon of blood. Like, who came up with that? What if I was deadlifting 225 pounds before I gave birth? Like, and I have a person over here who, so it's really about knowing you and your body and what you're able to do and having some, you know, professional corroborate that with you, obviously, and having medical clearance. But I mean, it's something to really think about.
Yeah, no, I mean, we are born to move. And, you know, I had a conversation with somebody today about like how I break up my workouts and I vary my load. I don't do upper body and lower body. I vary the load. So I'm never working at 100% of my max. And that's not how moms or coach people in life either. I'm like, you want to be working about 60 or 70% so you can come back every single day and do a little bit more. And that's what our kids do naturally. They they sleep when they're tired. I mean, maybe they need a little guidance sometimes.
For sure.
But when it comes to like play, they know what they're doing, right? They want to naturally move their bodies, and we kind of lose that over time. And, you know, I was going to say this earlier in the conversation, whether you're a mom or not, like you could have a desk job. This stuff will benefit you, right? It's not actually like, these are things that we were meant to be doing. We're meant to cross the line. We're meant to challenge our bodies. We're meant to get on the floor. We are meant to move. And
so for like even dads or even men or even whoever, you know, I know that's like not necessarily a target audience, but still, like I think it's a huge piece. You know, you get people who just go to the gym and they lift up their weights and they do whatever, but ask them to get into any of the positions that you just did before, not a chance.
Totally.
So, like,
I need to transition from a crab to a crawl and then back to the other side. And then added a partial get up.
Yes. And that's really different, right? That's, you're looking at mobility and stability at the same time, not just muscular strength. So I think that people always forget that there's multiple parts to fitness, which is something I teach my older kids. Like even I have kids that I work with that are older that have CP or have, you know, just different different like, diagnoses. But I teach them about the components of fitness and say, what can be hard for you, but what else can you focus on? And then how can you bring it all together? Because I think that's really super important as a lifelong thing. So I think the other piece of this that's take home is you creating, time for yourself and that self-care piece, and knowing that you need to do this for yourself and your body is instilling or starting a really healthy relationship with movement and exercise or whatever it is for your kid.
And like
So
on like the movement piece translates over to the brain piece, right? Or and
mhm.
right? It's intertwined. So by practicing and doing things, it pays off in school. It pays off
Yep.
social life. It pays off. It trickles into all the other avenues of your life when your body is
Mhm.
good.
I mean, there's millions of there's so many studies about how movement, increases like achievement in school and all that stuff. And I can't imagine that it's not the same for adults and your performance. I mean, how many companies, you know, provide money for like for time or have a gym within, like big companies have gyms within their building that they say, okay, go here, do this, just because they realize the importance of movement. If you're sitting down, like you're not going to be productive. You can reach so much more potential by moving, by
Yeah.
getting that brain flow, all the juices flowing, as we say, right? So
Yeah.
it's huge.
Thank you, Erica. You are a wealth of knowledge. So tell people how to find you and what you're up to.
Okay, so you can find me at Dr. Eri Jane. That's like my private account. You can find me and Allison at All Day Development. We're, posting here and there about our just the little tidbits that we like to get out there. You can direct message me if you have any specific questions about, baby development or anything at all like that. And that's really it. I mean, yeah, and I'm here. I'm off for winter break from school, so we got 1 week of hangout time. So this is
I know
kind of a big deal.
I see you this week,
Yes.
which is not right now, but we're seeing each
Yeah.
other differently.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm gonna share our video on my feed, and then I'm also going to take the recording that I didn't record. Um, I'm going to take this video, put it in our newsletter. So
Perfect.
everyone stay tuned. You'll see more of Erica and I talking about mommy and baby movement or health in some capacity, probably over the next, who knows how long this is going.
I have some good ideas for us, so we're ready to roll.
And Missy movement show.
Yeah. Woo.
Okay, thank you so much. I miss you so much.
Miss you too.
I'll
I'll
see
see
you
you
in a
soon.
later.
All right. Bye, guys.